Long ago, in a galaxy kinda close, I think it was this one actually. The year was 1968, and a small British man made a small British company. That company was Amstrad. The company was named after its founder, Lord Alan Sugar. Yes, that Alan Sugar.
Thank you, Lord Sugar.
To quickly break the name down, Amstrad or AMS Trading was split into two parts. The AMS stood for Alan Michael Sugar and the trad was shortened from trading, Amstrad. Initially, the company specialised in consumer electronics, specifically hi-fis, TVs, car stereo cassette players, amplifiers and tuners. However, when the 1980s came around the corner, Sir Alan Sugar himself decided to start shifting focus from standard consumer electronics to home computer entertainment systems. Introducing the Amstrad CPC 464. This was Amstrad's first attempt to enter the home computer market, racing up against Commodore and Sinclair. The system was only marketed and sold to the UK and other European countries. For some reason, the US wasn't worthy enough to bask in the glory of the CPC. With that being said, the CPC sold moderately well at the time. A huge 2 million units were sold altogether, which was pretty good considering the size and interest of the market. While the CPC was essentially a home computer, there were a lot of games released for the system. But why would you want to play something like Street Fighter when you can just, I don't know, use Mini Office 2?
Buying a fucking PC.
Oh, it's beautiful. Oh wait, is that the Lord coming to take me from this wretched place? The games and applications were primarily sold on cassette tapes, and I still have no idea how they really work. I guess it's kinda like how floppy disks work. To play the game, you would simply insert the cassette into the far right side of the keyboard, enter some hacking code, and the game would eventually load. Ah yes, the welcoming sound of a lobotomy. I used to own this system when I was younger. Specifically, I was lucky enough to own a colour monitor. Ooh. Oh, did I not say the monitor was sold in either pauper green or full colour Chad? The worst part is that you could only use the system with the Amstrad monitor and not a standard TV. So if your monitor died, you'd have to fork out the money for a brand new monitor. I guess it helped to maintain the system's lifespan, kinda? Anyway, I used to own one of these. I don't anymore and I haven't for a long time. However, recently I've been thinking a lot about it. For this video, I want to take some time to reminisce and talk about some of the games I used to own. I don't remember every single one of them, but I do remember a good number of them. And I want to start with one of my favourites, the Trapdoor. The Trapdoor is one of my favourite cartoons growing up. It's basically a stop-motion claymation cartoon. Basically the whole episode structure is Burke, the main blue character, getting into a little adventure with his side character called Boney and a little spider called Drut.
I said I'm D-I-M. Dim, yes, very true. Not dim. I'm doing it myself.
The humour is very British and very dry, so if you like dry British humour, then I would recommend watching The Trapdoor. It's very funny, and it's got a very soft spot in my heart. So the show came out in 1986, and the game came out the same year. It was developed by someone called Don Priestley. It was released on different platforms, the CPC, Commodore 64 and ZX Spectrum, but the one I had was the CPC version. Basically, the structure of the game is very simple. The thing upstairs gives you instructions on things that he wants. So if he wants like a can of worms to eat, then you just open a trapdoor, collect some worms, make a meal for him, and then send it up to him upstairs. So for as diverse as the show is, the game sort of incorporates that and becomes a very unique little game, and it's very endearing. I think for the time that this game came out, it's a very complex game where it gives you a lot of instructions on things to do, and there's a lot of layers to steps that you have to take. It's just a very interesting puzzle game. There was a sequel, Through the Trapdoor, as well, but I didn't have that. I only had the original The Trapdoor, where basically Burke goes into the trapdoor and then the game is, I guess, you getting out. But this game is solely focused on Burke collecting resources and making meals for the thing upstairs, so it's a very charming game and a very charming show. There were a lot of arcadey games on the CPC, and Bomb Jack was one of them, and it's the first I want to talk about in this video. The whole premise of Bomb Jack is very simple. You're limited to one screen, it doesn't move, it doesn't change to a different screen, and the whole point is for you to collect bombs, and when you've collected all of them, similar to Pac-Man, you go on to the next stage. The controls are very floaty, you do float around a lot, and there are time limits for you to collect bombs. So you'll see that bombs start to fuse, and if the spark reaches the bomb itself, then the bomb explodes and you lose a life, or if you touch an enemy, then you lose a life as well. But this game sparked a few sequels in the future as well. It wasn't just the standalone game, but the one I had, I believe, was just Bomb Jack 1 and maybe Bomb Jack 2, I don't remember. But it's a very quick and snappy arcadey game. It's a nice game to just quickly throw yourself into and play a few minutes of. Boulder Dash is a very simple looking game on the surface, but the more you look into it, the more complex the game becomes. The whole point of the game is maneuvering yourself around mazes and digging out terrain, and while you're doing that, boulders can begin to fall down and crush you, so you lose a life. So because of that, you have to be very aware of where you're moving, and it turns the game from what looks like a very simple little game into something very complicated, where you have to really think and plan your movements. The game is structured very simply. Basically, you have to go around the maze and collect gems, I guess they are, and then you move on to the exit, and then you move on to the next stage. But it's how you move around the stage and how you get to the end of the stage that's very unique about the game. The way that you get to the end is entirely up to you, but the game sort of does guide you in ways to go. But ultimately, it is a game that sort of forces you to be very careful with how you progress through the game. It's a very interesting game. There were Boulder Dash games released up until, I think, the Game Boy Advance, but there's been nothing really since. But it is just a very charming game that I would recommend playing. It really does make you think. It's a nice fun game. Elevator Action is weirdly one of my favourite CPC games. It wasn't initially released on the CPC, it was later developed for it. I think it was initially developed for the MSX. But the CPC version is a very solid version, and it's one that I genuinely would recommend playing. It works perfectly fine. The whole premise of the game is very simple. You go from the top of the building all the way down to the bottom. The first stage has you rappelling into the building, and then you have to use the elevators and doors located on each floor to help you get all the way down to the bottom. And when you get to the bottom of the stage, then you move on to the next one. Like I mentioned, there's doors located on every floor in the game, and you can use them to gain extra points. I think in later versions you could gain extra weapons and things, but I think for this version it's only really used for being able to get extra points for you to get a high score by the time you reach the bottom. You can also gain extra points just by shooting the enemies on the screen as well, and they can also come out of the doors. It does add a bit of depth because the enemies can have sort of like a personality where they can dive in and out of doors as well, so it's not just you that can use them. But overall, I would say that Elevator Action is a very nice little arcade game that I don't think a lot of people even remember anymore. I don't remember the last time I even heard anyone mention Elevator Action. But it's another game where you have to use a lot of patience to be able to play the game properly. If you're just rushing around, then you're probably going to end up dying or getting crushed by an elevator. Yeah, it is a fun game, but you do have to be a bit patient with it. Oh Mummy is an interesting game, and it's a game that I don't have a lot of memories of, so being able to give a quick statement on it is a bit difficult for me. But basically the whole point of the game is you're wandering around a room, and you have 4 rows of 5 tiles, and the whole point is for you to walk around a tile to show what's inside. The aim is for you to uncover every single rectangle on the screen and then move on to the next stage. The issue is that the more you uncover, the more likely it is for another enemy to appear, so it does become a bit more hectic the more you play. This game was actually packaged in free with the CPC when it first released, which is very interesting because it's a very short little game that you can play, and it gives you a rough idea of how the system really works. And honestly, I think that it's a fine game. It is a very cool Pac-Man style puzzle game, but I really don't think it's anything really to write home about. It's a fine little game, but it's not really anything that I can't see being put onto the Atari 2600 or something. The CPC actually got a port of Paperboy that was originally released in arcades. I think everyone mostly remembers the NES version that came out, but there was also this version that was released too, and somehow it was the first version of the game that I played. If you've never played Paperboy before, it's very simple. You're just cycling down the road delivering papers to people that you're passing by. I guess the more risky the shot is that you throw, the higher the score is that you get. But I don't want to spend too much time talking about this game because it's had a lot of ports and it's existed for a very long time, and a lot of people do still know about Paperboy and it's still very fondly remembered. One thing I do find interesting is that the game doesn't have any sound at all, which is a bit weird. Even just like little things when you throw the paper and you hit something, maybe that would have been interesting to have sound, or maybe it has something to do with the amount of processing it takes to do that with the graphics and everything else at the same time. I'm not quite sure, but I do find it interesting that there's absolutely no sound at all, no music or sound effects. Grand Prix Simulator is as basic as you could possibly get with a racing game. The best way to think about this game is basically thinking about Micro Machines, or even more recently the top-down races in Kirby Air Riders. The camera is fixed and you basically just turn yourself to go around the track. There are multiple tracks that you can race on, so there isn't just the one. But it is a very, very simple racing game, and I remember playing this a lot because it sort of reminded me of like Skate Electrics a bit. It is a bit of a shame that a third of the screen is taken up by a HUD, but I guess that's a sacrifice you have to make if you want to have something that looks nice where you can visually see everything that you're supposed to. As a short arcadey style racing game, I think that it works perfectly fine. Obviously there are a lot more competent racing games on the CPC, but this one is just perfectly fine. It doesn't have to be an extremely detailed game for it to be fun and enjoyable. This is perfectly fine as it is. I spent years trying to remember what this game was, and I only remembered it recently, and literally the only reason I could remember this game is because I cannot possibly in any way, shape or form tell you what the graphics are on this screen or what on earth is going on. The colours and the graphics are literally all over the place. It's so hard to really tell what you're actually looking at. Even the character you're playing as, I really cannot tell you what it's supposed to be. But this art style struck me so much that it's the only reason I can even remember this game. The game might seem simple at first and very straightforward. You're a character that can float around and shoot, and the whole point is for you to escape a maze while trying to not die. You have a thrust, a laser, and an energy gauge. But the more that you go into this game, the less linear it becomes. It becomes more open and more difficult for you to find your way around. It's just a game that I genuinely never really understood what the point of it was. I'd spend so much time exploring it and just looking around and trying to find out what I'm actually supposed to do that I never really understood what the whole point of this game is. I'm trying to look at the Wikipedia page for Terminus and there genuinely isn't a lot of information about this game, so even if people have played it, I don't even think they know what's going on, so but it is a very strange little game if you're interested in checking it out. It's called Terminus, or Terminus, the Prison Planet is the full name, and you can play it on the ZX Spectrum, MSX and the CPC as well. So we're going from one game that's synonymous for me because of the graphics to another game that is synonymous with me because of the graphics, but this is because of a different reason. Brainache has you playing as a character that's descending into a planet. The graphics, you can probably tell, are very striking because they're very detailed. There's a lot of texture in the environments, there's a lot of small details that they've added that's very interesting. There's not a lot of colours in the game, there's only about 3 colours in total. There's green, yellow and red. But I think the most important thing about this game is the way it looks, and it does look very, very good, even if the colour palette is very minimal. Sort of gives you the idea that it's a very dark place and it's difficult to really see properly. The game is fairly difficult because your character is so small. It's very easy for you to get sort of lost in the graphics, and the enemies can sort of damage you very quickly because of how small you are and how slow you move as well, so it's very quickly that you'd end up taking damage and dying. I'm not going to lie, but this is a game where I really haven't been able to get really far into it because I didn't understand what the goal is of the game. From what I gather, the whole point of the game is for you to collect things underground and then take them back to your ship, and then you gain points from doing that. But that's what I gather. I'm not sure if there's more to it than that or if that's the whole thing. But I think when I was growing up, I was more interested in what the game looked like than anything else. The game does have vertical scrolling, and scrolling games weren't super common on the CPC. The only issue with this is that the scrolling is very jittery. When you move the camera, it jitters a lot and things flicker around a lot of the time. It's really difficult for things to look smooth in this game, but it did try. Technically, this game is very good. It did try to be technically impressive, which I can admire it for. It did very well. But the end result is kind of just a bit all over the place. Yabba-Dabba-Doo, more like Yabba-Dabba-Don't. I don't know, I don't remember much about this game. So basically this is an interesting game based off of the Flintstones. So the whole point of the game is for you to build your house, and according to the Wikipedia page, convince Wilma to move into the house with you. It's a very interesting basic little game. Apparently it's the very start of Bedrock. Unlike Brainache, Yabba-Dabba-Doo is screen based, so you go from screen to collect things and move on to the next area. And I'm not going to lie, I don't like the look of this game. It's very yellow. The game is sort of blinding with its art style, where everything is a very, very bright yellow. Even Fred himself is just yellow for some reason. You do have some colour in the middle of the screen, blue and green, but I just find it really interesting that the main area that you're looking at to play and the main elements of the screen that move are just yellow. For the most part, the game is silent, there's no sounds or anything, but the moment that you pick up an item or do something of interest, then there is a sound, but it doesn't last very long. Kind of makes the game feel a bit empty and lifeless, especially when most of the colour is yellow. Honestly, I cannot say on the surface whether this game is worth playing or not, but it doesn't look like it would hold my attention for very long. One thing that sucks about trying to find information about these old games for the Amstrad is that not a lot of these games are actually documented in any place. And that's the same for this game called Superkid. Basically, this is a game that I played that I don't really have a lot of memories of. And it was really hard for me to even find this game because there's just not a lot of information about it. The only thing that I could really remember about this game is that you're flying around a city, but it wasn't Superman. And somehow, while I was looking at people selling Amstrad games, I somehow managed to find it in a lot of games listed. So this game sort of plays out like a normal superhero sort of game. The whole point of the game is to save citizens from people attacking this city. You do have characters along the bottom that you do need to rescue, so you have old people and then young people. The old people are funny because you have to rescue them from bingo and take them back to retirement. And if they get shot, then they just explode. So that's nice of them. So the whole point is for you to rescue everyone before you can move on to the next stage. You can attack the enemies and kill them as well. You can also collect more points throughout the stage as you're flying around and doing other things. Flying is really simple and straightforward. You just move the joystick in a different direction and you start flying around. You can also just walk off of a ledge and also start flying, which is interesting. Well, the gameplay is fine. I don't really have a problem with the gameplay. Artistically, I don't really like it so much because there isn't really an outline on Superkid, so it's really hard to sort of tell him from the background sometimes. Unless you're in front of a colour or a pattern that really doesn't stand out so much and is really noticeable, sometimes it's really difficult to fully see the character when he's moving. It just looks really weird. One interesting thing about this game is you get two options when you first start the game. You can either have sound effects or you can have music, but you can't have both. And I would recommend having sound effects because the music loop is tedious. While it would have been nice to have had both at the same time, I understand that there are limitations, so I do sort of appreciate that we at least got the option to have sound effects instead of being forced to listen to the music. But if you're interested in this game, maybe check it out. It is a weird little game that I haven't heard anyone talk about, and there's really not a lot of information about this game that's out there really, so if you are interested, this game is called Superkid. Before Jump King, we had Roland in the Caves, and this is the last game I want to talk about. Structurally, the game is very similar to Jump King. If you've played Jump King, then you'll understand the process of Roland in the Caves. The whole point of the game is for you to jump and escape a cave that you're in, and each level is a different layout of a different cave. The whole point is for you to get up to the top and be able to escape. Roland is actually part of a franchise. There were a lot of games that were released for different systems, but all under the same Roland name. Just for some of the names of the games you have, Roland Ahoy, Roland on the Ropes, which was a pretty popular one. You got Roland Goes Digging, Roland Goes Square Bashing, and Roland in the Caves, which is what we're talking about now. Visually, the game isn't anything to really write home about. The main character you play as called Bugaboo. He's a flea. He doesn't look like anything super interesting. His details are very flat. He's coloured as the way he is. Environments mostly use a checkerboard pattern to make it look like there's sort of depth, so you can tell the difference between something you can land on and a background, essentially. The whole time that you're trying to escape the cave, you're trying to escape a pterodactyl that's chasing you the entire time. The way that you control the game is you hold the jump button, so you build up power, release it, and then you jump in a direction you're facing, and you just basically do that until you get to the top. It isn't the most complicated game in the world, but I think you would be surprised at the fact that no one has ever really mentioned this game, considering that there's a whole game that was released called Jump King, and I didn't remember anyone talking about this game. So there you have it, everything I can remember from my time with the Amstrad CPC. It was nice to go back and relive some of these games that I haven't thought of for about 20 years. But was it worth it? Not really. What I've learnt about these games while recording footage is that a lot of them simply haven't held up over time. Weird design choices, slippy controls, bad sound design, bizarre graphics, unfair enemy behaviour, all of this brings the system's library down. From the games that I experienced, it just wasn't as fun as I was expecting. I will cut it some slack though. It was released in the early 80s and the system had very limited specs. Although a certain Japanese company snuck out a cheeky console around this time too, and that library is beautiful. But I think that's enough about me. I'm interested to know what your experiences were with the CPC. Yes, you wiggly little fellow. Do you still have one? Are you still playing it from time to time? Have you found out how to complete Terminus? Leave a comment down below. I'd love to see other people talk about this and not just me with my weird experiences. With that, I'd like to thank you for watching this video. The format was a bit interesting, but I thought it was a good idea to try. Hopefully it came out okay and people actually enjoyed watching it. If you did, please consider leaving a like and subscribe. It'll help by spreading the mythical word of the CPC. And until next time, ta-ta.